Okay, so thank you very much to the organizers for everything, and in particular for having this paper on the program. It's joint work with Zsófia Brani and Nicolas Cordassier, my colleagues at Sciences Po. Just wanted to show that I respected the color code. I put the G in red, as it should be, because it says it's a red G. So it's a paper on demographics and capital flows. Okay. So just as a way of motivating what we do, I'm going to say things that for the most part are well known about some patterns that we observe in the data in terms of demographic evolution. Okay, so the world is aging. That's not big news due to a combination of two things: a drop in fertility on the Y side and a fall in mortality rate, or an increase in life expectancy. Okay. What's interesting in the data is the convergence in demographic patterns across countries, across developed countries and emerging countries. Okay, so I'm going to show you first what happens for fertility and then some measure of life expectancy. So this is since the 1950s until today, and then based on forecasts, the evolution of some infant mortality adjusted fertility rate, so that's some sort of effective fertility rate, and its evolution over time. So you see a massive drop everywhere, and especially for emerging countries, and you see that there is this convergence across the two groups of countries. Okay. So we have a very extensive sample of countries, 140 countries. Okay, so it's very large, and so in 1 second I will show you a more detailed picture with a more refined grouping of countries. Okay. In terms of life expectancy or longevity, this is one particular measure that we represent here, the probability of surviving until age 65, conditional on being 25. Okay, but anything you take, life expectancy at birth, for instance, you have similar patterns over the same period, and again, like for the years ahead of us, it's based on forecasts. You see this convergence, and of course, like you see an increase in longevity, which is the second driving force of aging. Okay. So that's the big picture, and what we find interesting is that actually there are some nice variations across countries, okay? Both across emerging countries and across developed countries. Across developed countries, it's sort of well known. People have documented the fact that old Europe and Japan have been aging faster earlier than others, for instance, but also it's true that for emerging countries, the speed and timing of convergence towards developed countries is massive. Okay? So this is, I'm going to show you fertility first and then some measure of longevity. And here, so I'm showing you like more detailed evolutions. For developed economies, I show you like the aggregates and the particular patterns for old Europe and Japan, where you see slightly lower fertility rates and the levels at as early as the 1950s and 60s, already a bit below those that you observe for the average of developed countries. Okay? In terms of what's happening for the emerging countries, you see very early and fast convergence for Southeast Asia, okay, and at the opposite end of the spectrum, very slow convergence of fertility and slow drop in fertility for some part of like sub-Saharan Africa, okay. Latin America would be a bit slower than Southeast Asia, and then the rest of Asia and what we call the Middle East and North African countries, also in the middle. But what's interesting is like that there is substantial variation here, okay? And the same applies with the same sort of, I'm just finishing this and then I take your question. The same applies for measures of longevity. So again, like a bit more aging in old Europe and Japan as compared to the typical developed countries. A fast catch-up in Southeast Asia, very slow catch-up with actually, because of AIDS in Africa, some slow catch-up with even like some like opposite pattern of, during the AIDS epidemic in Africa. Sorry. What's the 20%?
Southeast Asia line jumped up by 20%.
Yeah. You know better than me. No, because okay. So Southeast Asia, of course, like so we have yeah. So there's a bit of that. I was going to say that it's population weighted. So China has a big importance. That's why I say you probably know better than I do. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is.
Population is 66 to 76. So one is 59 to 61, and the other is 66 to 76. So that middle part, I don't know.
You don't know what it is, and I need to. I need to.
Like it takes other countries so many years to get 20%.
Yes. No. That's it's population weighted, and therefore I need to investigate what's going on with the Chinese data points.
And they're calculated like life expectancies, like with contemporaneous age-specific survival probabilities, I guess, right? And then it's all a snapshot and time in that year, I guess, right?
I say yes, but the reality is I forgot how the
Yes, we'll take yes.
Yes, sorry. Sorry. Yes, I bet. Sorry.
So the fertility rates, are they just in total or weighted by conditional on age?
No,
Rates will be very different depending on the age composition. This is just total.
Yeah, total. Yeah, and again, it's one minus the probability of dying in the first 5 years times the fertility rate. Okay, so it's.
Population in South Central Asia is much younger than in old Europe and Japan, and still, it's very conditional on age.
Yeah.
The one-child policy.
They have more children with a.
Yeah. Yeah. So you see that there is something interesting. So both in the global aspect and in the country-specific aspect, we think. So what we want is. Okay, it's quite natural to believe, and so we're going to do that as is natural in a life cycle context, but that those demographic patterns have some impact on savings, investment, and international capital flows. Okay, and what we want to analyze is both the effect of like the global trend in aging and the more country-specific parts and deviations from what's happening with the.
These predictions by the demographers don't take into account savings, income, or anything, right?
No. It's no, they don't have like a model of like endogenous like fertility or investment in health. I doubt so. I mean, I don't remember, but I would assume that it's not that.
So when you say growth, do you mean throughout the entire period? You look at the interaction across countries.
When I say what?
When you say growth,
global.
Flow.
I say I will have an.
Yeah, multi-country model with
Yeah.
saving and
Yeah.
capital flow.
Yeah.
Is it for the entire period?
Yes. That's.
How do we think of capital flow earlier on?
No. I will have in my model the fact the world will be financially integrated only like since like the mid-80s, for instance.
Okay, so that would be like a
Yes.
change.
Okay, so what we want is to investigate like the impact of demographics on savings, investment, capital flows in a multi-country life cycle model of savings, and we think it's important to to understand well the interaction between demographics and some country-specific, like institutional features, in particular the heterogeneity in the development of credit markets, and one that's obviously springs to mind, like social security system. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do, and let me tell you what are the theoretical insights, and then we have first develop some theory in a simple framework, and then have a quantitative model to sort of try to do some serious quantitative exercise. In terms of the insights, I think this one is the most original. It's about this idea that you don't need any heterogeneity in demographic patterns in order for demographic evolutions to be a possible driving force of capital flows. Okay, and because of some general equilibrium effects, and the idea is global aging will have the effect of depressing the world interest rates. Okay, and then if especially the reaction of savings across countries to a fall in interest rates varies because of other types of heterogeneity, like in credit markets or in the social security system, that will be enough to trigger uphill capital flows of the type that we've observed in the last decades. Okay. Then in terms of the effect of country-specific aging patterns, well, that's pretty standard, but countries that are aging faster than the rest of the world are more likely to export capital. Okay, what's less standard that comes from the interaction that we're interested in with institutional country-specific features is that impact of country-specific aging on capital flows is going to be stronger in less developed economies. Okay, so we think that this is particularly interesting because there is a lot of heterogeneity across emerging countries to potentially explain the variation that we observe in terms of capital flows experienced by emerging countries. Okay, and so there is this paper by Pierre-Olivier Gourinchas and Olivier Jeanne, the allocation puzzle, which focusing on emerging countries makes the point that it's not true as the standard model would predict that the faster growing countries are the ones that tend to receive capital. In the data, if anything, they tend to export a bit more capital, and maybe it's related to this point because it turns out that the countries that are growing faster also tend to be aging faster. Okay? I don't want to make too much of this picture because for now it's not in the paper, but yes?
About the motivation, so I guess it's going to be a sort of standard neoclassical growth model at the base. So let me play devil's advocate.
Standard, it will be like some three-period OLG.
Yeah, but so yeah, let me play devil's advocate. So wasn't Luca? I think Lucas was who said, so why doesn't capital flow to poor countries, right? So isn't it that like our neoclassical view of the world gets it on the levels totally wrong where capital goes? So then is that a good way to thinking about these changes? To think that model.
So this part is related, but is something else than Lucas' observation, because here we are not talking about north-south. We are talking about within emerging countries, those that are growing faster. Which ones have like current account surpluses? Which ones have current account deficits?
So you want to explain that differential taking as given?
Yeah, and
level puzzle sort of. Or is the puzzle solved? I don't know, but I guess it's not solved.
Yeah, so here we have like one driving force, okay, of those uphill capital flows, and here it's really emerging towards developed. Okay. I don't know how to like conclusively answer your question, but let me show you like this picture that I wanted to show you. So it's a scatter plot that represents for a large sample of emerging countries, okay, over the period like 1990-2010, the relationship between some measure, some relevant demographic measure, or some measure of like prospective aging, okay, for those countries, and their average current account over GDP positions over that period. Okay, we're not controlling for anything. Okay, so I really don't want to make much of it. But what's interesting is there is a lot of variation, as you would expect from the earlier pictures that I've shown you, in demographics across emerging countries, which lines up relatively well with their capital on accounts like experiences. Okay.
So average is over a 20-year period,
Yeah.
and you get many countries with 10% of deficits of the current account for the 20 period.
Yeah, and which ones there are? Again, I need to
Very close
to
10 and 5, you have like a third of the country.
yeah.
But they are not aging.
No, but
Any-
they borrow like 150% of their GDP.
Yeah. So for now, again, I don't want to make much of it. It's not in the paper, but it is related to things that are in the paper because we want to understand like capital flows and current account positions, and one of the driving force will be demographics. Other will be productivity growth and growth differentials. Okay, and we think that adding demography is going to help, and this picture already suggests that it will. Okay.
Did you remove foreign aid from this?
Sorry.
So,
Those two observations on the right, are they driving now?
I really doubt so, but again, okay, not showing this. Just like for your perusal, and if you don't like the 2 points, I removed the picture altogether. But I don't think they are driving.
looks like it will survive.
It's still there. It's still there. If you want to remove like those, I'm not sure. Okay. Anyway, we're not. So let me move on and talk. Essentially, the literature hasn't really talked in terms of the theoretical mechanism about this effect of global aging on capital flows. Okay, it focused on country-specific aging, and then in terms of the data, people have looked mostly at OECD countries, developed countries. We look at a much broader sample of countries. Okay, so the theory will be developed in the simplest like framework we can think of that really allows us to investigate like theoretically the effect of aging and its interactions with important aspects of heterogeneity across countries in terms of credit markets, pension systems, etc. And then we have a quantitative model. This part is preliminary, but I think it's quite promising. Okay, so the theory is as follows. We have like a 3-period OLG type of model where agents live for at most 3 periods. Okay, young, middle age, and old. When they're young, again, like a lot of assumptions are made for analytical convenience. They do not work, and they will face credit constraints. Okay, when they're middle aged, they do work, contribute to the social security system, and save for retirement. Okay, when they're old, they consume out of their accumulated assets and out of the social security benefits that they receive. At this stage, no bequest motive. Okay. The demographics are exogenous. Okay, it's not a model with endogenous fertility, etc. Okay, so that will be the driving force. To capture life expectancy in this model, we said that a middle-aged individual in period T will reach the last period of retirement with some probability PT. So it's the survival probability, this PT. And then fertility is also exogenous, and it just relates the size of the young agent cohorts. Okay. Across successive periods. Okay. Production is standard. Cobb-Douglas, labor augmenting productivity that follows some exogenous process with gamma A T+1 being the growth rate of productivity between t and t plus 1. Factor markets are competitive, so which pins down the wage rate in terms of the relevant state variable, which is capital per effective unit of labor. Okay? And assuming full depreciation of capital, this, I think we call it R. I'm not sure about the notation here. I would have thought that this is between t minus 1 and t, that the rate of return is RT. Okay, I will confirm that in a second. Okay, so social security system is simple, pay as you go. There is a contribution rate tau t, that is the tax on the middle age in period t, and the replacement rate that determines the pension benefits received in period t given your gross income in the past period. Okay, so we work under a balanced budget condition. Those are all the contributions that are received in period t, and they depend on the wage base, number of workers times their gross wage, and then this is the contribution rate. And those are all the benefits that are distributed in period t, and they depend on last period's wage, and sigma t is my replacement rate.
How many of those countries have those?
We are doing, okay, so that's going to be, I think, an important contribution that we are doing, because we are really documenting for those 140 countries. We've had some research assistants spending the summer on this, going through a description of the social security system and trying to sort of summarize what are those things. So
they exist. I mean, that's like
yes, yes. And what's interesting is actually a lot of emerging countries, the official replacement rate is very high, but then if you look at coverage and so the number of the percentage of retirees who actually receive those contributions is very low. So we will have some measure that is a combination of the official rate and the coverage rate. So what this says is pretty simple. This really is the old dependency ratio, LO over LM at period t. Okay, and of course it's higher. Okay, which means aging when the survival probability into old age is higher, and when the fertility rate is lower. Okay, and so if you want to target a certain replacement rate, okay, you will need to tax more when the old dependency ratio is higher. Okay, and also, I mean, what really puts a bit less pressure on the social security system in terms of the taxes is if there is high wage growth from one period to the other. Intuitive. Okay. Okay, what's the household problem? So is to maximize some expected utility where the probability of reaching old age enters. The utility function is standard isoelastic with elasticity of interval substitution denoted by omega. Don't ask me why. Less than 1. Okay. Subject to the budget constraints that are here. So the idea is that in equilibrium the agents want to smooth consumption over time, so they will borrow when they are young, okay, as much as they can. I will tell you. So they will have some negative asset position at the end of their youth, okay. And then when they're middle aged, they earn this wage, they pay their contributions to the system, repay their debt. This is negative, okay. And then with the rest, consume and accumulate assets for their old age, okay. So there's this one thing which is a bit funny in this simple setup is that what they get at the end is not only what they accumulated, but what's coming from their relatives who died. Okay, so it's one way of doing this redistribution of unintentional bequests. Okay, so that's why there is this divided by pt plus 1, but don't worry about that. So they have those assets that they have accumulated and that their relatives have accumulated if they survive, plus the pension benefits that they receive. Okay, and then they have they are constrained in terms of access to credit when they are young, and they cannot borrow more than a certain fraction of the present value of their future labor income. Okay, so the theta t is very important. I put a t here, but it's going to be essentially fixed over time. Notice, and I should have said that before, that for now I don't have some index of countries, okay, because I'm presenting the setup like for a given country, and then I will have I indices for countries because I have a multi-country setup. So for analytical convenience, we relax this assumption in the quantitative model. Assume that the credit constraint on the young is always binding. Okay, so they borrow as much as they can. Okay, that simplifies things a lot because then you know exactly what's your disposable income when you reach middle age. Okay, so if you were born in period t minus 1, you reach middle age in period t. Your gross income is WT. You pay contribution rate tau t. You need to repay your debt, but you know exactly what fraction of your current wage you need to use to repay the debt. So this 1 minus tau minus theta w is your disposable income after you've paid contribution to the system and repaid your initial debt. What are the two terms here? The first one, forget about the second one for one moment, which is the one that would prevail if there was no pension system and without the tau. It's just like the assets that you accumulate at the end of the period of your middle age period. It's a fraction of your wealth, and so this fraction is 1 minus your propensity to consume, and it is increasing in P. So the higher the probability of reaching old age, so the higher your life expectancy, the more you're going to save when you're middle age. Okay, so that's one of the channels through which aging matters. So this you can think of the middle age doing some intergenerational borrowing because they're going to receive like pension benefits in their old age, which are really because the middle age of the next period are going to be taxed. Okay, they sort of borrow against their future pensions. Okay, so that reduces their overall asset position. Make sense? Okay. Of course, credit constraints on social security per se, they affect savings. That's not the core of what we have to say. But the higher theta, so the more the credit constraint is, so the greater the access to credits, the lower aggregate savings are going to be because there will be more borrowing and less saving by the middle age. Okay, and the extent of social security also affects aggregate savings. The more generous the pension system means lower aggregate savings, or here you can see at least in terms of the asset positions of the middle age, because they are taxed more and they receive more later, so they save less for their old age. Okay, so in every aspect of development reduces this asset accumulation by the middle age. Okay, so this is an important slide. How many minutes do I have?
17. You missed
18. Make it 8. Okay, so this is an important slide, and I want to go slowly through it. Okay, so this is the net asset demand in any country. Okay, in period T. So it's like the total assets held by the young and the middle age, because the old at the end of the period they have zero asset position. Okay, minus all the assets that there is to hold. In a closed economy, this would have to be zero. Okay, that would be the equilibrium condition. In an open economy, it will be NFA, the net foreign asset position, over GDP. So that's an important object. Okay, and I've already described what the individual asset positions are. Okay, so I just plug in what they are, and then there is this KT plus 1, which is with full depreciation, just the investment in period T. So that's KT plus 1 over YT is just the investment rate in period T. Okay, so you recognize things that you've already seen. This.
But wait a second. So it's a small open economy, right?
No, it's not a small open economy.
So it's closed right now. Okay.
For now, it's closed.
So later then will just be pinned down by the labor force, right?
The what is?
No, then so.
Okay. So so what I want to understand is how the net asset demand is affected by different things. Okay, but first I want to understand those three terms, and it's very easy. The minus theta thing is just coming from the borrowing of the young. Okay. Then there is this term and this term, which comes from the asset position of the middle age. Okay, so that's their saving out of their current income minus the borrowing against their future pension benefits. Okay, and I have a term here which is just due to the investment rate. Okay, so what's the impact of aging? Okay, so aging is a fall in the fertility rate or an increase in the probability of surviving in the last period. Okay, so let's take each of them. So a fall in N, okay, here implies an increase in net asset demand. Okay, so aging, more demand for assets, more savings, which is one of the driving force of the fall in interest rate. And this is due, in terms of the simple model, to a composition effect. It's just that the relative share of the borrowers in the economy falls because there's less kids, like young, relative to the middle age. Okay, and P, for instance, and you increase in P, the most important thing is you increase your propensity to save for retirement because you have a greater probability of reaching retirement. Okay, so those are the direct effects, and notice, for instance, that the effect of an increase in P is not going to be the same across all countries. And it's going to be greater, for instance, in less developed countries because the marginal propensity to consume is interacted with what's the share of your income that is available to save for the next period. Okay, so it's very important because you see that the effect of aging, some aging shock, like for instance an increase in P, is heterogeneous across countries if they differ in terms of their development. Okay, we'll come back to that. And, but there are some indirect effects of aging which go through adjustment in the social security system. Okay? If there is an increase in P or a fall in N, any source of aging, you will need to adjust something, either like an increase in contribution rates or a fall in replacement rates. Those two things actually do not have the same impact on net asset demand. Okay? An increase in the contribution rate would reduce the amount that is available to save by the middle age because they have to pay more taxes. Okay? And a fall in replacement rate means less pension benefits later, so I need to save more for my old age. You see, there are a lot of, I'm sorry, but there are a lot of effects which are quite subtle, even in this very little model. And you see again that the extent of those adjustments depends on how the system is generous in the first place. So again, heterogeneity across countries. And then what's important to understand is, because we will have this general equilibrium effect, we will have in the model aging causing a drop in interest rates. So it's a good point to see how different countries will respond to a fall in interest rate. And the fall in interest rate, let me just say, is going to affect the borrowing of the young, and when the interest rate falls, there will be more borrowing, okay? And the savings of the middle age, and there are different effects, income, substitution, wealth effects, okay? If omega is less than 1 and say omega 1/2, what dominates is the income effect, and the fall in interest rate will generate an increase in the savings of the middle age, okay? So overall, there are multiple channels, and the overall impact is ambiguous. But what's clear is that there is a chance, because of the heterogeneity, that in response to a fall in the interest rate, the net asset demand will fall in more developed countries and tend to increase or fall less in emerging countries. Okay, and so you'll see that later. Okay, so now I look at what's happening under financial integration, where the market for capital has to globally. Okay? So I've got this I index. And first thing I want to say is to look at, you remember, I want to understand the effect of global aging and country-specific aging. Okay? So first I'm going to try to understand things by looking at the integrated steady state across all countries. Okay? And if you think that the steady state is not enough, I will show you some things about the transition later, but the comparative statics on the steady states tell you a lot about the transition. And I'm going to, for now, focus on the case where, so at the steady state, I've got some fertility rate, some probability of survival. They are constant across time because I'm at the steady state, and equal across countries because I'm interested for now in global patterns. Okay? So no heterogeneity across countries in terms of demographics. I'm also killing things that have to do with heterogeneity in productivity growth. Okay, so what can I say in that world? I can say something first about the effect of aging on the interest rate. Okay? And so the interest rate is determined at the steady state, at this integrated steady state, by this expression, and what's key is this theta bar and tau bar, which are respectively weighted averages of the credit constraint parameters and contribution rates of countries weighted by the relative size of countries in terms of effective labor. Okay? And if you just like look at the effect of theta bar and tau bar, okay, that's the first thing that is interesting per se, is the world interest rate is increasing in theta bar and tau bar, which means, for instance, that if you give more weights to less developed countries, okay, so which have lower thetas and lower taus, okay, it means that the world interest rate falls. Okay, so that has nothing to do with demographics, but that's something that is interesting per se. What's effective labor? Is this guy? Productivity times the number of workers.
Women, men, both.
In the model, there's no concept of.
Or you don't go with data.
Yeah, we do go to data, and we and.
No, but you don't. I mean, it doesn't matter if you just sum most men and women. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, men, women, we treat them equally in the data.
I don't know participation. Participation.
No, it's we have. You're right. Yeah. No, you're right, and I don't have a good answer to your question. Because I think we calibrate the evolution of demographics in the quantitative part, which I will briefly discuss. On number of workers, but maybe we're actually doing it on the population size, so then participation matters, and we would say like everybody participate, and we would be missing one thing, okay, but which is not really the main focus, but thank you for drawing my attention to this, okay. So what's important is the effect of global aging on the world interest rate, and under mild restrictions, in particular, you need the elasticity of interval substitution to be sufficiently below 1, or like the level, the generosity of the pension system worldwide to be low enough to get like this result that you want to get, that global aging causes a fall in the interest rate. Okay, so now I come to what the title is about, and I have an expression here which describes like the net foreign asset position of countries as a function of GDP. Okay, so if you have like positive NFA, it means essentially you have current account surpluses. Negative NFA, you have current account deficits. Okay, and this expression is like telling you that if, say, all countries are the same in terms of pension systems or generosity of pension systems and differ only in terms of access to credits, okay, countries which have a smaller theta, so less developed credit markets, this will be positive and tend to be the ones that export capital. Okay, if countries only differ in terms of the pension system, the ones with less developed pension systems will be the one which save the most and tend to export capital. So this is nice, but this is not our topic. Our topic is what is the effect of demographics on this. Okay, and again, so we are looking at those steady state expressions, and we are doing some comparative static, and we are getting at the effect of demographics on capital flows by looking at the effect on the dispersion in NFA positions across like countries that export capital and countries that import capital of the two sources of aging, like increase in P, fall in N. Okay, and so we we characterize analytically in the paper conditions under which aging causes a greater dispersion, which would translate into capital flows from the capital exporters to the capital importers, which are the capital exporters being the low theta countries, poor development of credit markets, and poor pension system. Okay, so I have some little really small experiment in the context of the simple three-period model that actually gets at this greater dispersion in NFA over GDP when there is some common aging across like two countries which differ only in theta or differ only in the pension systems. Then I'm going to go very fast on this one. It's 2 slides to discuss the effect of country-specific aging on capital flows. So here we have in mind an emerging SOE, which is will be represented in this dashed red, and the rest of the world. Okay, and again, it's like an experiment in the simple three-period model. Okay, three-period OLG, and the idea is we are looking at a scenario where the rest of the world, okay, which is big relative to the SOE, is aging, both in terms of fall in fertility, increase in longevity. The SOE also experiences the same evolution with convergence, okay, and on top of this, integrates with the rest of the world in period 0. So you think of this if you want at 1985, okay? Here the length of the period is 25 years. Okay. What's important for me is I want to contrast what's happening in terms of the current account, which is savings minus investment, in the case where the convergence is fast versus in a case where the convergence is delayed. You remember like Southeast Asia versus other emerging countries. And what's interesting is capital like flows for investment purposes in the small emerging economy from the rest of the world. So investment will shoot up in both cases, and in particular, it's not because of fast growth in productivity. It's because the demographic characteristics of this economy is interesting. Okay, and yeah, and then savings. What determines whether there is a current account deficit at opening or a current account surplus is the relative magnitude of the savings reactions and savings evolution and investment evolution. With delayed transition, okay, there is a big investment boom because the demographic is attracting capital, and the increase in savings due to aging is delayed itself. So that means for a certain period of time, investment is greater than savings, and you have a current account deficit. So I'm going to move to some results from the quantitative model, and because I don't want to hold you longer. Okay, so the quantitative model is the one you would expect as a more serious model, multi-period, with depreciation, with some age income profile, and some unintentional bequests that are redistributed across countries. What I'm going to show you is just like one or two slides. At this stage, it's like mostly to show you that the model has great potential at capturing nicely some features of the data. It's not a serious calibration exercise. We call it manipulation. Okay, but I'm going to show you experiences, like 2 country experiences, and the country will be, in that case, representing developed versus emerging, and then 3 or 4 country experiments with like 2 types of developed countries and 2 types of emerging economies. And those groupings make sense because really those are pretty homogeneous in terms of development of credit markets, in terms of the development of the pension systems, productivity growth, and demographic evolutions. Okay? And so we put it, we try to, at this stage already, to do it as best as we can. And what we can generate, and I'm just going to show you like one picture, is for instance this evolution. Here you want to think of period 0 as 1980, that's when the world integrates, so current account positions are 0 before. Okay? And I have like 4 groups of countries. The US, very developed credit markets, not so developed pension system, and aging, you see what it is. It more or less fits the data. This is more than 20 to 40 year old divided by more than 60. Okay. Southeast Asia, the demographic evolution, you know what it is. Fast productivity growth, low development of credit market and pension system. Europe, pretty generous pension system, less developed credit markets than the US. Productivity slowdown in the 90s, and whatever demographic evolution you want, a bit more faster aging than in the US. And the rest of emerging countries, which are similar to Southeast Asia in terms of credit market and pension systems, but do not experience the same productivity growth. So that summarizes pretty much a lot of what's going on here. And here, this picture represents over time. You see, you have evolution both over time and across countries. And what's going on essentially is in the 90s, the Europe, which has a productivity slowdown and is already very old, is saving a lot and is exporting capital to the rest of the world. China, which is still attractive because the aging hasn't started so much, is not as pronounced as it is today, and is growing very fast, is attracting capital, and then is exporting capital because it's aging very fast. And the rest of emerging countries are currently attracting capital because of their demographic characteristics. Yes, it's so I did my best at trying to convince you that, well, in the data there are large variations across countries in the timing and the pace of aging. That in a simple life cycle model, you see that capital flows will depend both on worldwide, global, and country-specific demographic evolutions. We think that we have a framework that qualitatively does a good job at accounting for salient features of capital flows both across time and across countries. We still need to do a proper calibration exercise and quantitative assessments. And what's missing also, to make the point that demographics is really important, is some counterfactual experiments where we kill some dimensions of the demographic evolution. Okay? And then we have ideas about extensions. Okay? So thank you.
Thank you.